All right. I got a question for you. How many of you have what we call the weekly production meeting? Right. Right. I see hands. I don't see anything, guys. I'm looking at a camera. All right. Most of you tell me you regularly have weekly production meetings, but you don't always have weekly production meetings because sometimes you don't have enough productions to meet on. But the fact of the matter is your culture and your business model and your systems and processes rely on some sort of weekly planning meeting where people come together, and you probably call it a production meeting because, yeah, it's traditional. And I want to talk about that meeting today because I've sat in quite a few of them, as you might imagine. And I got to tell you, when my client says, "Oh, when you come visit us, you need to sit into the production meeting," and I said, "Well, how long is your production meeting?" "Well, it's usually about 3 hours." I just want to throw open a paper bag. I'm sorry. There is nothing that any of you do that requires 3 hours of meetings every single week to go over. And I sit in those meetings, and I'm proven correct on that. And here's why. Most of what we talk about in those meetings is redundant. Um, these meetings suffer from hijacking. Somebody will take over the meeting or drill down and want to talk about a specific show or a specific problem or specific technology or a specific person. We get circular conversations where no decision is actually made. We got a room full of people who are waiting for a decision. That's why they're at this meeting, is they need to do their job, but nobody's told them that it's okay to do it yet because we haven't had the production meeting. Unnecessary updates. Week after week after week, you get the exact same update from the same people on the same meeting, and nothing has changed. If you eliminated all the time wasting babble that goes on in these production meetings, you could probably cut them down to about 15 minutes. If you only talk about things that are updated or changed since the last meeting, you're going to certainly have a shorter meeting. And if you manage the meeting and manage an agenda, you can cut off the things that need to be talked about later. Guys, can you talk about that later? We're not going to solve that now. So let them move on and do all of that. So what goes in that production meeting? Well, yes, we have coffee, we have notes, and we have people talking over each other. We're not going to fix that part today, but we are going to tighten up this agenda. Welcome to your weekly dose of uncommon sense, helpful insights, and tough love. The Intentional Success Podcast comes to you through the generous support of Merch Crew. For 25 years, Merch Crew has protected growing live event companies by removing risk and streamlining paperwork so they can scale faster. Crew confidently with trusted freelancers by starting today at merchcrew.com. So early in my career, I am, as a manager, I'm making air quotes with my fingers, as a manager, I was tasked with getting things done, and I needed to know what it is we were going to do. And fortunately, I could walk across the hallway and ask the one other salesperson in the building, "What are we doing on this show?" And we could have a little meeting and move on. That worked great for a number of years. Or we could have those meetings ad hoc. We could, get the little updates. It's always great. Tom pop his head at my door and say, "Hey, this just happened. We need to do this." And our team of who needed to know was very, very small. I could take that information, he and I could discuss it. We'd make a plan. And then I would talk to my team and say, "Hey, here's what we need to do operationally. Oh, we need to book an extra person. We need to change this travel." All those things got worked out. But as the company got bigger, it was harder to have those conversations and harder to keep all of the jobs that are going on alive in your mind without having to stop, look it up, refresh your memory. And certainly anything that's happening in the next week, we've got a pretty clear eye on. But if we're doing our jobs, and this was true 30 years ago, just like it is now, we're looking 3 and 6 months ahead. We need to plan as far ahead as we possibly can so that we can reduce the urgency of hiring the right people at the last minute. We don't want to hire people at the last minute. All the good people are gone. We're looking at jobs in advance because we want to hire the best people. Now, it also means that we want to get the best available sub rentals, and we want to get the first driver on from the trucking company and all that kind of stuff. But the farther ahead we look, the better off we're going to be. But what goes in that meeting? So There's two meetings that are happening in these long, drawn-out production meetings. The one meeting that's going on is the technical director types, the production manager types, the project managers who all want to talk about their individual shows. They want to talk about the technology. They want to talk about the nuance. They want to figure out, how are they going to put the screen here if they've got this pillar here and all this kind of stuff. They want to talk about those things. And while that sounds very production-y, it is not. Okay. That is a technical directors meeting. We're talking about individual events and we're answering questions that should have already been answered before we came in to the planning meeting. Planning is for planning, which means we need to have our stuff sorted out, and everybody who owns information and is responsible for information needs to have put the information in the right place. Some people argue that that person needs to be there, but if you put the information in the right place and everybody has access to the information, it does reduce the amount of time you need to spend in meetings. And honestly, if I provided all the information on my show, I probably wouldn't show up to a production meeting to hear people talk about their shows. It's of no interest to me. So we need to remove the things in the planning meeting that are about individual jobs. And we're going to talk about jobs in relationship to all the other jobs that are going on. So where does the stage go in this one job does not affect any other job. I have two jobs. They both need a stage. We own one stage. That's information I need to discuss in planning. Where is our stage going to go? Where are we going to sub-rent? So these are the decisions that we're making in the planning meeting. So now that the sub-rental person knows what to book and what job to book it on, and the warehouse operations manager knows which job to set that aside for. They'll have that institutional knowledge of what the plan is, but we're also going to record that knowledge inside of our system. So I'm looking at in a planning meeting, and I'll get into more details, is we've got to make sure that we have our staffing done. First thing is staffing. Are the jobs that we have that are imminent in the next 6 weeks, are they 100% staffed? Are we staffing key positions and jobs that we know are going to happen or we believe are going to happen 3 and 6 months in advance? It's okay to be staffing shows a year from now. Maybe you want to have a separate meeting where you kind of look ahead and do all of that stuff. I get that. That makes sense. But sometimes your planning meeting needs to look way far in the future, especially when there's not a lot of stuff to look at in the next few weeks. So get this planning meeting right. We're going to do staffing, we're going to do gear flow, and we're going to do logistics. All of these are discussions to understand where our resources are going to go, so the people who are responsible for procuring them or getting them there have their marching orders and know what to do. It is informational. It is not to create the solution. You need to have some other meetings to create solutions, and you need to do them on a job-by-job basis. But when we come to the planning meeting, we have the request. Here's the solution we want. Here's how we want it. Now in planning, we can see what can we do to fulfill that request. But we're looking at all of the jobs at the same time, and we're reconciling shared resources because not everybody gets, the first system or the first truck or the first crew. So here's what I want to know in these meetings. Well, let's just start with new orders. Okay. When a new order comes into this meeting, now, hopefully we've had that technical directors meeting where we've pre-vetted all of this. We pre-vetted, do we understand what's being asked of us in this event? Are there any unusual needs or technical hurdles that require special attention? In other words, is it going to require a drawing, engineering, testing? Are we going to have to talk to outside experts? Or are we going to have to contract somebody else to do it? I need to clear those up way before we ever get to our planning meeting. Specialty subrentals, should we have done that? Do we need to book crew now? That's important to know. Are we going to be short any standard equipment? In other words, we can present this meeting as just added. However, we're going to be completely out of X, audio, video, lighting, projection, whatever it might be. All of that needs to be identified in advance of the planning meeting. So again, the technical directors need to sit down and figure this out. We need some information in this meeting about when does this job need to be prepped. That should be on your schedule. If there's a reason for it to be prepped early, Not that technical directors decide when orders get prepped, because that's warehouse operations. But we need to say, hey, this job needs to be prepped by this time because of this. So we just need to make sure that the information about this job is clear. And in fact, it's not that the entire meeting needed to be prepped. It's probably, well, we just needed to prep the lighting because the client's LD wants to come in and walk through the order with the master electrician. That's just information, folks. All of this can be cleared up and clarified and requested in the order before we ever sit down in the planning meeting. Right. Now, once we've solved for this, we can talk about what's changed. So we come into this job, we understand what's going on, we look at the staffing needs, we look at gear flow. Where's this gear going to come from? We have lots of gear in the warehouse. We can pull this from the warehouse. Awesome. Good information. Or this show would best flow from this job that's going to Tennessee. But you know what? The job that's in California is closer if we just added some stuff onto that truck. This is gold. This is the kind of stuff that as a company, you will make more money and you will have fewer problems if you look at how you can stack jobs in trucks. Anytime you can send a truck out and get 2 or 3 jobs without bringing it back, you will make more money. You will absorb and spread out more of those logistics costs. And you will do a better job of planning because you're looking at all of those jobs in relationship to each other and sending enough gear to do everything, which often means that some of the jobs have a little bit of extra gear, which is, wouldn't that be great for them to know? So in this planning meeting, I'm going through each of these jobs. I'm making sure that I understand what I'm subrenting. I make sure I understand which truck is going where, which gear is flowing where. Audio from this show is going to show A. The lighting from that show is going to show B, but the video from those shows is coming from show C. We can figure all of that out, put it in the plan, list it in the computer. This is now a short meeting because once a job is planned, all we need to talk about is, drumroll please, what's changed. Are there any changes to a crew and equipment needs that materially affect the current plan for this job that we're talking about in planning? No. Good. Move on to the next job. Now, here's what happens. In a production meeting, everybody wants to talk about their job. The project manager wants to talk about their job. The salesperson wants to talk about their job. If it's a big job, operations wants to talk about how many extra people they're going to need, yada, yada, yada. We don't need to talk about it. We already know these things. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? Do you need to book extra crew in the warehouse? Book extra crew in the warehouse. That's why we're having this meeting. You now know that you're going to need extra crew to prep that order in the timetable that's selected. Go do your job. Book the extra crew. We're not going to do it in the planning meeting. We're telling you, here's the information and you need to act on it. The person who's subrenting is not making subrental calls in the middle of the meeting. The person who's staffing is not staffing in the middle of the meeting. They're taking that information, they're going back to their desk, and they're making the phone calls, sending the emails, reaching out to people, recording what they've done, and putting it back in the system so that when we come in next week and that job comes up, that work has been done. If the person leading the meeting opens that up and says, hey, I see that the video director position is still open. I know we talked about it last week. What's going on? What's the update? Why didn't you tell me before this meeting? Why am I just learning about it now? Oh, we're waiting on a call back from so-and-so. Awesome. Great. Thanks. Let's move on. Okay. If they don't call back by the end of today, come to me. We'll start searching for somebody else. Fast meetings, get through the meetings, make sure everybody has the information to do what they need to do. And it is not just about talking yourself down from your fear and panic about how busy you're going to be. This is actually taking care of the things that will reduce how busy you will be. Nobody wants to be busy or busier than they should be. We want to be a healthy level of busy, which means that we planned on being busy. We have the resources there, which makes it feel less busy. So let's face it, if you feel too busy, that's a you problem. We can plan around all of that. So make sure we're using our meetings correctly and we're not wasting 3 hours regurgitating things that we already know about jobs that aren't going to happen yet, and focus to make sure that the jobs we have on hand are 100% buttoned up and that we're looking as far into the future as we can. So if you have one meeting a week with the team, this is the meeting to have. If there's some little sub meetings that need to happen, little convos, little tete-a-tetes, little, you know, coffee station visits that need to happen to get things down the road, that's great. But when we get into the meeting, we're taking action and we are sharing information and we are not going to talk in a circle. Send those people out of the room. Tell them to come back prepared next time. There you go. Make this meeting worth your while. Everybody will want to come to it, and you will have it even on the weeks when you don't feel busy. It'll just be shorter. And who doesn't want a shorter meeting? Thanks for listening. If this episode of the Intentional Success Podcast has made an impact on your day, then please leave a review and don't forget to like and subscribe. This podcast has been brought to you by the helpful folks at Merch Crew.